You think crime happens by accident. Wrong place. Wrong time. Bad luck. That belief is the first mistake. Because the moment you label crime as random, you stop looking for patterns. And the moment you stop looking for patterns, you become predictable. Here's the truth most people never see. Crime doesn't appear out of nowhere. It arrives on schedule. Not by the clock you use. By a clock you were never taught to read. Every crime begins long before anything illegal happens. Before a door is forced. Before money disappears. Before someone gets hurt. It begins with observation. Someone is always watching. Measuring. Testing. Waiting. And you almost never notice it. That's because crime doesn't hunt chaos. It hunts certainty. People assume criminals look for danger. They don't. They look for routines. The same train every morning. The same shortcut home. The same habits repeated so often they stop feeling like choices. You think repetition is safety. Criminals see it as permission. This is where the illusion starts. You're taught crime is emotional. Anger. Desperation. Impulse. But real crime is patient. It waits for patterns to lock in. For behavior to become automatic. For attention to drift. That's when probability collapses into inevitability. Here's something people don't realize. Most crimes are not committed against people. They're committed against systems. Systems of movement. Systems of trust. Systems of assumption. You leave your door unlocked because nothing ever happens here. That's not optimism. That's data. You park in the same spot because it's convenient. That's not efficiency. That's predictability. You believe your neighborhood is safe because it feels familiar. But familiarity doesn't reduce risk. It concentrates it. This is why crime feels sudden to victims. But never to the person committing it. For them, the event already happened mentally. They ran it through their head days or weeks before. They tested angles. They checked timing. They noticed what never changes. By the time action occurs, the decision is old. And that's the part nobody warns you about. Crime isn't random. It's rehearsed. Not in the way movies show. No blueprints. No countdown clocks. Rehearsed through observation. Through repetition. Through your unchanging behavior. People ask, why me? The answer is uncomfortable. Because you were there. Because you were consistent. Because you fit the pattern. This doesn't mean crime is your fault. But it does mean it wasn't accidental. There's a difference. Random events don't repeat with precision. Crime does. Same locations. Same time windows. Same types of people. If randomness ruled crime, patterns wouldn't exist. But law enforcement depends on patterns to solve cases. Criminals depend on patterns to commit them. Both sides are reading the same map. Most civilians don't know the map exists. That's the imbalance. And here's the deeper layer most people never consider. Crime follows pressure. Economic pressure. Social pressure. Psychological pressure. But pressure alone doesn't cause action. Pressure reveals opportunity. Where pressure meets access, crime appears. Remove access, and pressure dissipates. Remove pressure, and access becomes irrelevant. This is why crime spikes in specific places, not everywhere. Why certain areas feel off without obvious reasons. Why intuition sometimes warns you before logic catches up. Your mind senses pattern shifts before you consciously understand them. But most people ignore that signal. They override it with politeness. With normalcy. With the desire not to seem paranoid. Criminals rely on that hesitation. They know you want the world to make sense. They know you want randomness to be real. Because randomness means no one is responsible. Patterns mean someone chose. And choice is uncomfortable to accept. Here's the quiet reality. Crime is not chaos invading order. It is order exploiting blindness. It moves where attention is low. Where routines are high. Where assumptions go unchallenged. That's why two people can walk the same street and have different outcomes. One is visible to the pattern. The other disrupts it. Not with strength. Not with fear. With unpredictability. And this is where the story shifts. Because once you understand crime isn't random, you stop asking how to avoid danger. You start asking a better question. What patterns am I projecting without realizing it? That question changes everything. The uncomfortable truth is this. Criminals don't choose victims the way people imagine. They don't wake up angry and react. They don't roll dice and see who loses. They filter. Quietly. Constantly. Almost automatically. And most people never realize they're being filtered until it's too late. Selection starts long before proximity. Long before opportunity. It starts with signals. Every person broadcasts them. Not intentionally. Not consciously. But reliably. How fast you walk. Where your eyes go. How you react to minor interruptions. Whether you hesitate or adjust. These micro behaviors form a profile. Criminals don't need your name. They need predictability. People think criminals look for weakness. That's not accurate. They look for certainty. Certainty that you'll respond the same way every time. Certainty that you'll avoid confrontation. Certainty that you'll default to normal behavior even when something feels wrong. That certainty is valuable. Because crime doesn't want resistance. It wants compliance without force. Here's what most people misunderstand. The best target isn't the weakest person in the room. It's the person who won't interrupt the script. Someone who won't ask questions. Someone who won't change direction suddenly. Someone who keeps moving forward even when instinct says stop. That's why criminals test before they act. Not with dramatic gestures. With interruptions so small you barely register them. A casual bump. A harmless question. A momentary invasion of space. They're watching one thing. Do you correct the pattern or continue it? If you continue, the green light turns on. This is where crime stops being chance and starts being process. People who believe crime is random don't recognize testing. They dismiss it as coincidence. That was weird. Probably nothing. I'm overthinking. Those thoughts are expensive. Because testing is cumulative. One signal doesn't decide anything. But consistency does. When your reactions line up, the decision gets made. Not emotionally. Logically. This person will behave as expected. And expected behavior is easy to manage. That's why crime often happens to people who describe themselves as careful. They follow rules. They avoid trouble. They trust systems. And criminals understand systems better than individuals. Here's another layer people rarely see. Patterns don't just select targets. They also select timing. Crime doesn't strike when opportunity appears. It strikes when opportunity stabilizes. When your routine has been observed enough times that variation is unlikely. When nothing changes. Same day. Same hour. Same posture. Same reactions. The longer a pattern exists, the safer it feels to exploit. This is why crime increases when people feel comfortable. Comfort creates automation. Automation creates predictability. Predictability creates access. And access is the real currency. You can remove anger. You can reduce desperation. But if access remains, crime returns. That's why some people experience repeated incidents while others never do. Not because of luck. Because one disrupts patterns without realizing it. The other reinforces them daily. Most people don't want to hear this part. Criminals study you the way you study apps. They look for friction. They look for pauses. They look for hesitation. Anything that slows you down or locks you into behavior. Because once your response is known, control follows. And here's the twist nobody expects. You train criminals how to treat you. Not with words. With repetition. Each time you ignore discomfort. Each time you choose politeness over awareness. Each time you override instinct to preserve normalcy. You reinforce the signal. This person won't deviate. That's the message. This doesn't mean you should live in fear. Fear is another pattern. It means you should understand visibility. Criminals don't look for boldness. They look for invisibility within routine. Someone who blends into the environment but doesn't control it. Someone who belongs everywhere but owns nothing. That's the ideal condition. And this is where people get confused. They assume blending in keeps them safe. But blending in only works when unpredictability exists. Without it, blending in makes you disappear into expectation. And expectation is exploitable. Once you see this, certain things make sense. Why criminals abandon targets who change behavior suddenly? Why small deviations disrupt plans? Why confidence without aggression creates hesitation? Crime hates uncertainty. Not risk. Uncertainty. Risk can be calculated. Uncertainty cannot. And criminals avoid what they can't calculate. That's why randomness isn't dangerous to them. Unpredictability is. This is the shift most people never make. They try to reduce risk instead of increasing uncertainty. They add locks. Add lights. Add rules. But leave their behavior untouched. And behavior is the loudest signal of all. People think danger comes from people. It doesn't. It comes from environments that teach behavior without anyone noticing. Before a crime happens, the environment has already done most of the work. It tells people where to walk, where to pause, where to lower attention, where to assume safety. And people obey. Not because they're weak. Because environments reward conformity. You've felt this before. A street that looks normal but feels wrong. A building that makes you rush for no clear reason. A place where awareness drops the moment you enter. That feeling isn't imagination. It's conditioning. Environments create scripts. Most people follow them automatically. Wide sidewalks tell you to relax. Bright lights tell you to trust. Familiar brands tell you nothing bad happens here. Those signals are not neutral. They are instructions. Criminals don't fight those instructions. They wait for them to do their job. This is why crime clusters in places that look safe. Not abandoned chaos. Managed normality. Places where people stop scanning. Places where behavior narrows into expectation. Think about it. People walk slower in familiar areas. They check phones more. They assume oversight exists. That assumption is the opening. Because oversight doesn't prevent crime. Attention does. And environments quietly drain attention. Here's the mechanism most people never see. The safer a place looks, the more predictable people become. Predictability rises. Variation disappears. Patterns harden. Crime doesn't need darkness. It needs sameness. This is why criminals don't target panic zones first. They target comfort zones. Where rules are followed. Where interruptions feel out of place. Where deviation attracts social pressure. In those spaces, criminals stand out less, not more. Because everyone is behaving the same way. The environment has already flattened behavior. And when behavior flattens, selection becomes easy. Here's another layer. Environments don't just shape victims. They shape witnesses. People in structured spaces hesitate to intervene. They assume authority exists somewhere else. Someone else will handle it. Someone else is watching. Someone else is responsible. That hesitation creates a vacuum. Crime fills vacuums. Not aggressively. Efficiently. This is why crime often happens in transitional spaces. Parking lots. Stairwells. Entrances. Exits. Places where scripts change. Where people switch from public to private mode. Where attention drops for a few seconds. Those seconds matter. Criminals time them. They don't rush. They synchronize. They move when the environment tells everyone else to stop paying attention. That's why people say, it happened so fast. It didn't. It happened precisely. Now here's the part that's harder to accept. Most environments train people to be compliant, not aware. Signs tell you where to go. Lines tell you when to move. Systems remove choice. Choice is replaced with flow. Flow feels efficient. But flow removes agency. And when agency drops, resistance disappears without force. Criminals don't break systems. They hide inside them. They dress like the environment. Move at its pace. Follow its rhythm. That's why they're rarely noticed until after. People are trained not to disrupt flow. Not to stare. Not to question. Not to stop. And that training works perfectly until it doesn't. This is where crime becomes invisible. Not because no one sees it. But because everyone sees it through the wrong lens. They interpret abnormal events using normal rules. He probably belongs here. This is probably nothing. I don't want to make a scene. Those thoughts are environmental products. They didn't come from you. They were installed. This is why some places feel dangerous even before crime occurs. Your mind notices misalignment. The environment says safe. But small details say otherwise. Broken patterns. Mismatched behavior. People moving against the flow. Your instincts flag it. But you've been trained to ignore instinct in structured spaces. To trust design over perception. Criminals rely on that override. They know most people won't act until certainty appears. And certainty always arrives too late. This is why crime isn't random across cities. It repeats along design lines. Where movement funnels. Where exits compress. Where attention collapses into routine. The environment becomes a silent accomplice. Not intentionally. Systematically. And here's the shift most people never make. They try to read people instead of reading spaces. But people change. Spaces don't. Spaces repeat behavior. Over and over. Once you see this, you stop asking why certain places feel unsafe. You start asking what behavior they are training. Because behavior is the real target. Most people think crime grows in chaos. They're wrong. Chaos is noisy. Unstable. Unreliable. Crime avoids it. Order is quieter. Predictable. Efficient. And efficiency is attractive. Criminals don't want confusion. They want systems that run themselves. Because systems remove human friction. Order tells people where to stand. When to move. What not to question. It narrows behavior into lanes. And lanes are easy to exploit. This is the part that feels backward. The more structured an environment becomes, the less awareness people maintain. They outsource attention to rules. If something was wrong, someone would stop it. If this wasn't allowed, there would be a sign. If this was dangerous, it wouldn't be so organized. Those assumptions are powerful. And they're wrong. Order creates trust. Trust creates delay. Delay creates opportunity. That's the sequence. Criminals don't challenge authority directly. They wear it. They mirror posture, tone, timing. They move like they belong. Because in ordered systems, belonging is rarely questioned. People assume legitimacy before they verify it. That assumption is the opening. Here's why order matters more than darkness. In chaos, everyone is alert. In order, everyone relaxes. Relaxation is the resource crime consumes. Not fear. Not anger. Relaxation. This is why highly controlled spaces experience subtle crimes. Not loud ones. Theft without confrontation. Access without resistance. Manipulation without force. The system continues running while something is removed from it. And most people don't notice until the absence becomes visible. By then, the moment is gone. Here's something most people never consider. Rules don't stop crime. They standardize behavior. Standardized behavior produces predictable responses. Predictable responses are easier to manage than unpredictable ones. That's why criminals study procedures. Not to break them. To pass through them. They learn what gets questioned and what doesn't. They learn which actions trigger response and which don't. And they stay just below the threshold. Always. People imagine crime as bold action. It isn't. It's calibrated action. Measured to avoid friction. That's why most crimes feel strangely calm. No urgency. No panic. No resistance. Just motion. And that calm is unsettling in hindsight. People say, it felt normal at the time. That's not an accident. Order anesthetizes awareness. Now here's the uncomfortable layer. Most people believe following rules makes them safe. But rules don't protect individuals. They protect flow. Flow prioritizes continuity, not interruption. Crime is an interruption. So people trained to protect flow hesitate to interrupt. They don't want to be wrong. They don't want to cause friction. They don't want to break rhythm. Criminals rely on that hesitation. They know the system will pressure you to stay passive longer than it should. That extra second matters. This is why people freeze. Not from fear. From conflict between instinct and conditioning. Instinct says something is off. Conditioning says stay in line. That internal delay is exploitable. And it's everywhere. Airports. Offices. Public transport. Institutions. Anywhere order is emphasized over awareness. The irony is sharp. The more rules exist, the less people rely on perception. They stop reading situations. They start following instructions. And criminals operate between instructions. They move where rules don't reach. Not breaking them. Just bypassing attention. This is also why criminals avoid highly alert disorder. A chaotic crowd watches everything. A quiet, orderly space watches nothing. Eyes are forward. Minds are elsewhere. That's perfect. Now here's the shift most people miss. Crime doesn't fight order. It feeds on excess order. When everything is regulated, exceptions stand out less. When behavior is narrow, deviation hides inside similarity. That's the paradox. Too much order creates blindness. And criminals understand this intuitively. They wait for environments to become efficient enough that people stop thinking. They act when trust replaces scrutiny. This is why crime increases when systems expand faster than awareness. More cameras. More rules. More structure. But less attention. Because people believe someone else is watching. That belief is the most dangerous pattern of all. It removes personal responsibility. And crime thrives where responsibility is diffused. Nobody feels responsible, so nobody acts. That's not chaos. That's organized passivity. Once you see this, you stop asking why crime happens in safe places. You start seeing safety as a signal criminals read differently. Not as protection. As permission. Most people think danger starts at the moment something goes wrong. It doesn't. By the time you notice a problem, the critical window has already closed. Crime doesn't begin with action. It begins with timing. Not speed. Timing. Criminals don't rush. They wait. They understand something most people don't. Time is leverage. The longer a situation stays stable, the more valuable it becomes. Stability means repetition. Repetition means predictability. Predictability means control. This is why crime often feels sudden. Because you're noticing the end of a process, not the start. The start happened quietly. Incrementally. Out of view. Small observations stacked over time. What time you arrive. How long you stay. When attention drops. When responsibility shifts. None of this looks dangerous in isolation. That's the point. Crime doesn't announce itself because announcement triggers reaction. Instead, it waits for the moment when reaction is least likely. That moment is rarely when you think. Most people prepare for emergencies at peaks. Late at night. Empty streets. High tension. But crime prefers transitions. Moments when your mind is changing gears. Arriving. Leaving. Switching focus. Completing a task. Your attention is split. And split attention is exploitable. This is why criminals measure time differently. They don't ask, how fast can I act? They ask, when will resistance be lowest? That's a quieter calculation. And it's far more effective. Here's a detail people miss. Criminals don't wait for opportunity. They wait for permission. Permission doesn't come from you. It comes from timing. When nothing interrupts routine. When no one challenges flow. When everyone assumes continuity. That assumption creates a pocket of safety for the criminal. Inside that pocket, action feels invisible. That's why many crimes happen during ordinary moments. Middle of the day. Familiar places. Normal conditions. Because normality suppresses alertness. And criminals exploit that suppression. Think about how people perceive time under comfort. It compresses. Minutes blur together. Details fade. Memory weakens. That compression is useful. Not because it hides action, but because it delays response. Response time matters more than reaction strength. A delayed reaction, even by seconds, changes outcomes. Criminals build their plans around that delay. They assume you won't react immediately. And they're usually right. Here's why. Most people wait for confirmation before acting. They want certainty. They want proof. They want to be sure they're not misreading the situation. That pause is where crime lives. Not in aggression. In hesitation. And hesitation is a time-based weakness. Criminals don't overpower you. They outlast your uncertainty. They stay just long enough for doubt to win. This is also why people often say, I knew something was wrong. That knowledge appeared early. But it didn't feel urgent yet. Urgency arrived later. Too late. Time wasn't misjudged by accident. It was misused. Because modern life trains people to delay response. To wait for signals. For validation. For authority. But crime doesn't wait for approval. It moves when approval is least likely to arrive. This is where timing becomes invisible. Criminals understand attention cycles. They know when people look up. When they look away. When they mentally clock out. End of shifts. End of tasks. End of routines. Completion creates relief. Relief drops guard. That drop is measurable. And criminals measure it. They know that people are least aware right after finishing something. A purchase. A call. A commute. A decision. Your mind releases tension. And in that release, awareness leaks. Crime enters through the leak. This is why speed is overrated. Fast action attracts attention. Timed action avoids it. A slow, well-timed movement passes unnoticed. And unnoticed is the goal. Here's the deeper truth. Crime is patient because patience is powerful. It allows the environment to do the work. It lets people relax into patterns. It lets time soften resistance. The longer nothing happens, the safer people feel. And the safer they feel, the more they assume nothing will happen. That assumption is the real opening. Once it's in place, crime doesn't need force. Just alignment. And alignment is built over time. This is why prevention doesn't start at awareness. It starts at interruption. Breaking timing. Disrupting rhythm. Changing when you arrive, leave, pause, or engage. Not dramatically. Slightly. Because small changes fracture long observations. They introduce uncertainty. And uncertainty is expensive for criminals. It forces recalculation. Recalculation creates delay. Delay increases exposure. That's why criminals abandon plans more often than people realize. Not because of strength, but because of broken timing. Something didn't line up. A moment shifted. A routine cracked. That's all it takes. But most people don't realize timing is being used against them. They prepare for impact instead of preparation. They focus on reaction instead of interruption. And by the time reaction is needed, timing has already done its job. Most people think safety comes from strength. It doesn't. Strength reacts. Unpredictability prevents. Criminals are not afraid of power. They are afraid of uncertainty. Power can be measured. Uncertainty cannot. This is where most people misunderstand prevention. They add defenses. They add rules. They add visible barriers. But leave their behavior unchanged. That's backwards. Crime adapts to defenses. It fails against disruption. Criminals build plans around expectation. Expected routes. Expected responses. Expected timing. When those expectations collapse, the plan collapses with them. Not dramatically. Quietly. Most crimes don't fail because someone fought back. They fail because something felt wrong. A hesitation. A pause. A break in rhythm. Criminals don't need proof to abort. They need discomfort. And discomfort comes from unpredictability. Here's the part people rarely grasp. Unpredictability doesn't mean chaos. It means non-repetition. Small changes. Minor deviations. Subtle interruptions. Enough to prevent certainty. Certainty is what criminals need most. They don't want to guess. They don't want to improvise. Improvisation increases exposure. Exposure increases risk. So they avoid it. This is why criminals walk away more often than people realize. You never see the moment. Because nothing happens. That's the success. Someone changed pace. Changed direction. Changed timing. The plan dissolved before it formed. No confrontation. No drama. Just absence. This is why people who seem unremarkable often remain untouched. Not because they're invisible. Because they're inconsistent. They don't do the same thing the same way every time. They don't broadcast reliability. And reliability is exploitable. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Most people train themselves to be predictable because it feels efficient. Same routes. Same routines. Same reactions. Efficiency saves time, but costs safety. Criminals don't need much. They don't need perfection. They don't need certainty forever. They just need it long enough. Unpredictability interrupts that window. It forces recalculation. Recalculation forces observation. Observation increases exposure. That chain is expensive. So criminals disengage. They choose easier patterns. Always. This is why crime concentrates. Not because criminals are brave. Because people are repetitive. And repetition is visible. Here's something subtle. Unpredictability doesn't announce itself. It feels slightly inconvenient. A different turn. A longer pause. A sudden stop. To you, it feels minor. To someone observing, it breaks continuity. Continuity is the backbone of planning. Break it, and the plan collapses. This is why criminals hate people who control tempo. Not speed. Tempo. Someone who slows when expected to hurry. Someone who stops when expected to flow. Someone who looks when expected to ignore. Those behaviors disrupt scripts. Scripts are everything. Crime is scripted. Not written. Observed. The script is your behavior. When you follow it perfectly, crime becomes easy. When you improvise, crime becomes risky. Risk is avoided. That's the rule. Now here's where people get confused. They think unpredictability means aggression. It doesn't. Aggression escalates. Unpredictability confuses. Confusion is safer. A calm pause creates more uncertainty than confrontation. A quiet change creates more disruption than resistance. This is why criminals abort when something doesn't align. Not because of fear. Because of cost. Uncertainty increases cost. And criminals are cost sensitive. They optimize for low effort, low risk, high certainty. Remove certainty, and the equation fails. This is why technology alone doesn't stop crime. Cameras don't create unpredictability. Signs don't create unpredictability. Rules don't create unpredictability. Behavior does. Behavior is dynamic. Systems are static. Criminals adapt to static systems quickly. They struggle with dynamic behavior. Because behavior requires continuous observation. And observation is time-consuming. Time is exposure. Exposure is risk. This is why people who do nothing special but vary behavior stay safe. They don't stand out. They don't blend in completely either. They disrupt expectation without drawing attention. That balance matters. You don't need to be vigilant all the time. You just need to avoid being reliable. Reliability is not virtue in this context. It's a signal. Once you understand this, the world looks different. You stop trying to eliminate danger. You start denying certainty. You stop asking how to defend yourself. You start asking what patterns you're projecting. And that shift is powerful. Because crime feeds on sameness. It starves on variation. Crime will never end. Not because people are evil. Not because laws fail. Not because society is broken. But because patterns never disappear. As long as behavior repeats, someone will learn it. As long as routines stabilize, someone will exploit them. Crime isn't an anomaly in human systems. It's a response to predictability. This is the part most people resist. They want crime to be an error. A malfunction. Something that can be removed if enough rules exist. But crime isn't a bug. It's a signal. It shows where attention has dropped. Where behavior has hardened. Where certainty has accumulated. That's why every solution that ignores behavior eventually fails. More cameras don't stop crime. More rules don't stop crime. More warnings don't stop crime. They shift it. Crime moves to where certainty remains. This is why people feel frustrated. They follow every rule. They do everything right. And still feel exposed. Because safety was never about obedience. It was about awareness and variation. Here's the truth that changes perspective. Understanding crime doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you precise. Paranoia sees threats everywhere. Precision sees patterns. You stop fearing people. You start noticing structures. You stop scanning faces. You start reading environments. You stop asking who might do something. You start noticing when conditions allow something. That's freedom. Because fear reacts. Awareness anticipates. Crime feeds on reaction. It avoids anticipation. This is where most people finally exhale. They realize they don't need to control the world. They only need to avoid being controlled by routine. You don't need to dominate. You don't need to confront. You don't need to be hyper-alert. You need to remain slightly unpredictable. That's it. And unpredictability doesn't mean living on edge. It means staying conscious. Choosing when to follow flow and when to interrupt it. Choosing when to move and when to pause. Choosing when to blend in and when to disengage. Those choices are invisible to most people. But they're loud to anyone observing patterns. Here's the final reframe. Crime isn't something that happens to unlucky people. It happens where conditions allow it to happen easily. Remove ease, and crime moves on. Always. Not because it's afraid. Because it's efficient. This is why criminals don't chase difficulty. They don't pursue challenge. They choose alignment. And alignment disappears when behavior changes. Once you see this, a quiet confidence replaces fear. You stop believing in randomness. You stop blaming luck. You stop feeling helpless. Not because danger vanishes, but because you understand it. And understanding collapses illusion. The illusion that crime is sudden. The illusion that it's emotional. The illusion that it's unpredictable. It isn't. It's patterned. It's patient. It's conditional. And conditions can be changed. Not with force. With awareness. That's the difference between reacting and living deliberately. Most people never make that shift. They wait for certainty. They wait for proof. They wait for authority. But by then, timing has already been used against them. You don't need certainty to act. You need perception. Perception sees early. Reaction arrives late. And late is where cost appears. This isn't about living in fear. It's about refusing to sleepwalk. Because crime doesn't prey on fear. It preys on autopilot. Stay awake, and you exit the pattern. Not dramatically. Not visibly. Quietly. And that's the point.